Will you please pray with me? Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations in all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength, our rock, our Redeemer. Amen. We have spent the last 6 or 7 weeks in Paul's first letter to the church in Corinth. We were in chapter 12 and then chapter 13. In the last 2 weeks and finishing up today, concluding today, we've been in chapter 15, where Paul, the apostle, is writing at the end of this letter to the church in Corinth. He is writing to them of the things that are of first importance, the bedrock, the thing upon which we are to build our faith, to build what we believe in as followers of Christ. And it is resurrection, Paul writes to them. He says, and we talked about this last week, that resurrection is of such great importance that we cannot separate it from our faith. We cannot simply say we are Christians who do not believe in the resurrection, because Paul says if there is no resurrection, then everything that he has done has been a sham. It has all been for naught. All the worship, all the good works. If it's simply for this earth that we have the opportunity to follow Christ, then we among all people are to be pitied. But then Paul finishes up the section from last week, and Paul says, but Christ was raised from the dead. He was not raised as a philosophical idea. He was not raised as a theological consent. He was raised from the dead, a new body. It was the same, but it was different. He was the first fruit of the resurrection, meaning he was the first one to go through it among many. It is as Christ has walked through the gateway from death to new life, and he left the door open for anyone who wants to follow. This is such incredible good news. We've talked for 2 weeks in this third week on resurrection, and I understand it is still a mystery. Even Paul, if we study what he is writing, we don't completely get the complete picture of what it's going to be, of what it's going to look like. There are symbols of resurrection, and I like similes, I like metaphors, I like to get a broader picture of what things are, a richer understanding, and we have similes of and metaphors, symbols of resurrection, even now around us. I love the image of a caterpillar that enters the cocoon, and then it will emerge after a time, a butterfly. It is the same, but it is different. Yesterday, even I've not seen any butterflies recently, but yesterday, walking out to the car, I had a hint of spring. I looked and I saw just the very little green of our lilies poking out of the ground. Did any of y'all see that this week? Anybody? Okay, well, thank you for a few hands, because I feel a little lonely up here. You were good at the beginning of the service. Now you got kind of quiet, so I'm concerned. But we know that the bulb, it's in the ground. We know that God is doing things in that bulb. We know that there will be a flower. It's not meant simply to be a bulb. It is meant to sprout into something more beautiful. It is the same, but it is different. Symbols and analogies can be great ways to wrap our minds a little bit more around complex mysteries, but they are inherently incomplete because they say it is like something, but it is not the actual thing. Resurrection is real, and this is what Paul talks about in our reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 35 through 52. But someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of bodies do they come? Fool! What you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And as for what you sow, you do not sow the body that is to be, but a bare seed, perhaps wheat, or of some other grain. But God gives it a body as God has chosen, and to each kind of seed its own body. Not all flesh is alike, but there is one flesh for human beings, another flesh for animals, another flesh for birds, another flesh for fish. There are both heavenly bodies and there are earthly bodies. There is a glory of the heavenly, it is one thing, and that of the earthly is another. There is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars. Indeed, stars differ from star in glory. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a physical body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a physical body, there is also a spiritual body. Thus it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, that is Christ, became a life-giving spirit. But it is not the spiritual that is first, but the physical, and then the spiritual follows. The first man was from earth, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. As was the man of dust, so also those who are of the dust. And as is the man of heaven, so are those who are of heaven. Just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we will also bear the image of the man of heaven. What I am saying, brothers and sisters, is this: flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Listen, I will tell you a mystery. We will not all die, but we will all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. May this God's word speak to our hearts, our minds, our spirits. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The Apostle Paul writes a lot about change. When I was younger, I was all about change. As I have gotten older, I don't always know that all change is for the best. I believe in change that moves forward, and sometimes the change we see is change that is going backward down a slippery slope. When I was a younger person, I was a pure idealist. Some would even say a Pollyanna. As I looked out at the world, I assumed the best in everybody. I listened to teachers. I respected authority figures for the most part. I had a respect and trust in politicians. And I thought and figured I, along with others, could change the world. Now, I still believe groups of committed people who are focused on positive societal change can indeed change the world. I have seen it happen too many times to ignore it or to deny it or to be a cynic about it. But also I recognize that the world is filled with heartbreak. And the question about change, sometimes those changes occur because our hearts have been wounded, because trust has been broken. It has been violated. Sometimes we're not trying to harden our hearts, but simply by the wounds that have been inflicted, there is scar tissue. And it protects us from things and from trusting as much against future anguish. I haven't forgotten who I once was. I recognize that person. I am the same person, but I recognize too that I am different. I think if you look at your own lives, young or old, you can see ways that you are changed, that ways that you have evolved on things, on social issues perhaps, or how you view your neighbor, or how you view God. But those changes, we are the same people, we are just different. And I believe in change, even recognizing that not all change, especially change that goes backward, is positive. There needs, though, to be a change into something that we believe in, something that we can give our whole heart to without fear of it breaking, without fear of it being wounded again. And the Apostle Paul says that thing is resurrection. That thing is that change is something that we all can hope for. It reveals hope beyond present-day disappointment, beyond past regrets, or about uncertain futures. It is the promise of a new spiritual body when the perishable human body is no more. And I love how the passage today ends. In fact, it's not in the lectionary. It's not in the lectionary at all. I had to add the last two verses. It's like getting ready for and having a great Thanksgiving supper, but then you skip dessert at the end, everything you've been leading up to, and then the lectionary doesn't give it to you. But good news for us, we're 2 verses longer this Sunday. And Paul says, listen, I will tell you a mystery. We will not all die, but we will all be changed in a moment, in a twinkling of the eye, at the sound of the last trumpet. The trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. I mean, this is awesome. This is incredible. This is what a powerful thing Paul is saying. He's saying there's a mystery. He's not whispering it. He is shouting it. There is going to be resurrection. We will be changed. And yet, friends, we get it so wrong so oftentimes. Thinking about the creation of how God created the world. And when God created the world in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, he had 6 days of creation. And after he created, at the end of each day, he looked back and said, it was good. And it was good, and it was good, and it was good. And then he created human beings, male and female. And it says the image of God. God created them. God created these humans in the image of God. Twice it's referenced the Imago Dei, the image of God. That means we are like, there's something about God that is in us. But it's been said that God created humanity in God's own image, and humanity returned the favor. That we created God in our own image. That we created God to have the same personality as us, the same thoughts as of us. And if we start thinking that God's perfectly in line with the way you're thinking, then you have reversed the relationship between yourself and God. Because none of us are there completely in where God needs us to be. In fact, the writer Anne Lamott says, you have recreated God in your own image when God hates the exact same people that you hate. And we have done that. We have put a box around God, this idea that God is angry, this idea that God is looking at the world as the in crowd and the out crowd. God does not look at the world the way an 8th grader does. God does not look at the world the way a middle schooler does, but yet we oftentimes do as well. Apologies to any 8th grade boys or 8th grade girls that are here today, but I'm going to speak a little honesty. There is no one as clueless as an 8th grade boy, at least this one, and there's sometimes no one as mean as an 8th grade girl. Because we're going through some of the most difficult stuff that's in our lives, some of the stuff about self-loathing and looking at ourselves, and we lash out at people. And I would love to tell you that stops when you're in 8th grade, but it continues into adulthood. Because somehow or another, we have not let go of that. And we somehow think God is like that too, and that if heaven looks at all like 8th grade or looks like middle school, I don't know that anybody would want to go. Because if that's the way we look at God, that God has the same prejudices that we have, or the same fears, or the same hatred that we do, why would we want to go? What's the point of this? And we do the same thing we've created heaven in the image of the earth. We have the prayer in the Lord's Prayer on earth as it is in heaven. We reverse it thinking heaven's going to resemble what we have here. There was a recent newspaper, a circular that went out, a supermarket thing. You get those things right in the mailbox along with all the other junk mail that comes. Sometimes, even if you don't still receive the paper, you still get circulars on your driveway. And the circular went out in southern Arkansas, northern Louisiana. I don't know if any of you saw this, but what the circular said, it was making a political commentary, which I don't think is probably the best. It also made a theological commentary, which I took some more exception at. And they said on the supermarket circular, it said that heaven has walls. It has a strict immigration policy. It says hell has open borders. Let that sink in. And I took a breath, And I wrote, I had a beautiful written letter. I mean, I wrote and I typed it out. You know, Ambrose Bierce once said that speak when you're angry and you'll give or talk when you're angry and you'll give the best speech you ever regret. And so one of the gifts that God gives us is the backspace key, just to erase that. Because first of all, if hell had open borders, who would stay? And it speaks more to what C.S. Lewis writes about the hell that is the hell of selfishness. And the hell of wanting to remain in our own personal hell. There are plenty of people who are living lives of hell right now on earth because they're so wrapped up in their own selfishness. But beyond that, the idea of, well, heaven has walls. If you take the book of Revelation, the apocalyptic vision of St. John, literally, that's another debate for another time. We can talk about that. Well, yeah, John said it has walls. And it has gates. It has 12 of them, in fact. In fact, all of them are open. Let that sink in. We have picked and we have chosen things to make heaven look too much like earth, to make God look too much like us. And at last, this is what Paul is saying, a mystery that I am shouting. Some of you will not die, but we will all be changed in a twinkling of the eye, in an instant, in a moment. A trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable. Because what is perishable is our bodies. Paul says our bodies are basically like tents. They're not going to last. We know this. I remember 9th grade. I talked about 8th grade. I'm going to 9th grade. I'm being nostalgic for some reason the Sunday morning. But I remember 9th grade health class. Every health class, every high school I was ever at, where it was taught by a high school physical education teacher. And Coach Provance taught our health class. And there was one class. Do you remember that class? That class that we talked about our perishable bodies, I guess, ourselves. And in that class where we learned everything. I mean, we learned so much. We don't want to look each other in the eye for the next hour or two. It was too much. But they never tell you in those classes, they tell you what it means to change in adolescence. It doesn't say at all what it means to change when your body gets older. Because most changes as you get older are not welcomed with joy. You know, you can't hear as well, can't see as well. Knees and backs ache. But these are perishable bodies. So when the resurrection happens, it is an imperishable body. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know the full breadth of what this mystery is. We can give similes and analogies on what this is like, but the best we can point to is Christ, is to point to Easter Sunday. Mary comes to the garden. Our last hymn, it's in your hymnal. It's not in your hymnal. It's in your bulletin. We sing in the garden. Mary comes to the garden alone. That's what this song is about. She comes there, and then the stones rolled away. She runs back, gets the men. The men come in. They notice it's rolled away. They look inside. Then they leave, and she sticks around. And she thinks this guy is the gardener. And she says, well, if you have taken him somewhere, let me know where he is so I can go and I can grab him. I can bring him back to this place where he was safe in death. And the gardener says, Mary, calls Mary by her first name, that intimate name. And that gardener was Jesus the whole time. In an instant, in a blink of an eye, her eyes are open. She knew it was Jesus. And she said, Rabboni. And everything changed. It went from simply to be that all Jesus' disciples that called him rabbi were the 12 men. Mary is the first disciple of the resurrection. Later on, Jesus is on the Emmaus Road. He's walking with disciples who don't know him, and they talk the whole time, and they finally get to a time to eat together, and Jesus takes the bread, and he blesses and breaks it and gives it to them, this Eucharistic, this communion, Holy Communion feel. And when they received it, their eyes are open in an instant, and they recognize it is the Lord. And he had been with them the whole time. I don't know what Jesus looked like before death. I don't know what he looked like after. He was the same, but he was different. We will be the same, but we will be different. Because at last, friends, what the good news is about resurrection is that God's got you. Is that God has you for eternity. And when we believe that God has us, yes, we know there might be pains of our hearts or of our bodies, but God's got that too. Yes, we know there's going to be disappointment. Yes, we know that there is going to be prejudice. Yes, we know there is going to be disagreement. But heaven's better than what we got here. Our resurrected bodies are better than what we have right now. The last thing that Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13, it says there are three things that remain. Everything's going to end. Everything is going to be destroyed, but three things will remain: faith and hope and love. And the greatest of these is love. So may you have that faith, and may you have that hope, and may you never let go of that love, because God is working and moving in the imperishable, in the perishable, to make it imperishable, to make it permanent. This is good news, and if we believe that, we are more likely and more willing to live more freely and fully into the life that God has for us right now. So may we all believe in the resurrection, but also may we all live lives that reflect that resurrection. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen and amen.